What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. So today we're doing something a little different. I watched a documentary that I really loved, and people need to see this documentary. And I still believe when it comes to the issue of life, abortion, things like that, I still believe that if people could just hear the truth, I think their minds would be changed. Now, there are going to be some people, of course, that are just never going to see the way we see things. I get it. But I largely think if most people would understand what is behind this evil empire, it's so incredibly insane. I think that people would be like, hey, I'm not down with this, especially Christian people. And I watched a documentary that was really powerful and was made by a friend of mine called Seth Gruber. And we're having him on the show for the first time. So Seth, thanks for joining the show. And how you doing, brother?
Thanks, John. Good to be with you, bro. We were pleasured to have you endorse the book as well, and we'll be having you out on the screening tour for the film. My ministry is by and for the church, brother. We're trying to put ourselves out of a job. This is not the role of another 501c3. It's the role of the blood-bought bride of Christ. And so because of that, we're screening it first in churches. And you'll be joining us on one of those tour stops. But bro, this is really all of the dirty little secrets of the sexual revolution and the hidden history of the secular moral revolution and those kooky, weirdo, sex-crazed architects of our culture of death that created the insanity that has most Christian parents in America today going, what the heck is going on? And we're providing all those answers in this new book and film, The 1916 Project. And we're just honored to link arms with you, bro.
Yeah, I'm all in. See, I'm already all in. Everybody listening is already all in. Why don't I rewind? I probably should start and say, okay, so first of all, before we get to the documentary, why don't you tell us just quickly who you are? I always want to jump right into stuff, and then I go, oh, yeah, people probably want to, if they don't know who you are, they'd probably like to know. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, bro. I mean, so I'm a homeschool kid raised in Los Angeles County, and my mother directed a pregnancy resource center in the late 1980s, early 90s. These wonderful centers that love moms and walk alongside moms facing unplanned pregnancies and give them all the support and resources that they need. And in the late 80s, there weren't nearly as many pregnancy centers as there are now. And my mom in her late 20s was directing one of those centers. She married my dad. I was born in 91. And she was waddling around the pregnancy center, 9 months pregnant with me, loving on moms and helping save babies. So I like to say I've been a pro-life activist since I was a fetus, really long time. It's her body, her choice, apparently. So I guess I was my mom's body, so I saved those babies too. So that's how follow the science works there, John. And then I was homeschooled through eighth grade, went to public high school, Whittier High School, Nixon's alma mater. Did my senior project on abortion, and they told me, you can't pick the topic of abortion. That's one of the topics we don't let people pick. Well, they didn't know I was homeschooled, bro. So I said, here's a copy of the Constitution. You're making me read in government class. I recommend you read it or you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. And at 18 years old, as a senior in high school, I threatened to sue my public high school for viewpoint discrimination. They backed off real quick, and I did my senior project on the issue of abortion. And for the first time, volunteering for a pro-life ministry, I saw abortion, John. I saw mutilated, emaciated, dissected and dismembered children, pictures of aborted babies in the first trimester. 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks old. Eyeballs, ears, noses, mouths, fingers, toes of my preborn brothers and sisters who were slaughtered in the name of radical feminism. And I had never seen those photos before. And that's coming from a pro-life Christian homeschool kid whose mom ran a pregnancy center. So what you said in the intro to your show, John, like if most people knew, they might live differently because they probably just don't know. Well, if I didn't know or hadn't seen that horror, how many people in the larger pagan public do you think have? Of course, the answer is almost none. Long story short, I went to a Christian college in Santa Barbara. It's called Westmont. And I found out that they don't even take a pro-life position. In fact, there are pro-abortion professors on faculty at my alma mater, a Christian college in Santa Barbara. And so I started the first pro-life club at my college, John. First pro-life club. And they didn't like me because I called them out publicly. I had emailed debates with these pro-abortion professors. And to this day, I'm blocked from speaking on campus. Three students in the last 5 years have tried to bring me to speak on campus. as an alum who leads a pro-life ministry. And the college just stepped in and shut down that event and said, no, actually, we just spoke at YAF in Santa Barbara, Young America's Foundation, because that event was supposed to be at Westmont. And Westmont, my alma mater, told this conservative kid who was trying to bring me in to speak, they told him Seth Gruber will never speak on campus. And so
Wow.
that's my alma mater. I was there all 4 years. I was a pain in the rear, a stick in the back, of fly in the ointment. And that's where I learned what has become the tone and tenor of my ministry, the White Rose Resistance, which is now the fastest growing pro-life organization in America, which is, John, the problem is not really like evil men who do a bunch of evil stuff. The problem is the sons and daughters of God who know better, who have become silent, castrated, chestless cowards because they'll only speak as much truth as the spirit of the age allows them to, lest they lose their 501c3 status or stop getting invited to Davos. The problem is us who know better, who have lost our saltiness. That's why we're in this position. It's important to expose the deeds of darkness, right, brother? Ephesians 5:11. We're going to talk about some of those deeds of darkness today on your show about my film and book. My point is this, though. We learn about those deeds of darkness to realize our spiritual obligation and calling as Christians. Why are we in this position in America? Because Christians who know better have abdicated their duty. And so I learned that lesson in 19 when my Christian college, who I thought was dedicated to raising up the next generation of Christians to be salt and light, were actually in the process of normalizing darkness.
Mm. It's crazy to hear that Christian colleges are it's crazy to hear that about a Christian. I mean, I know that, but
Is it?
I mean,
it should be.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's not, because in other words, it's not the first time I've heard it. It shouldn't be shocking anymore, but it still is. I mean, it's still crazy to hear that even if they had people that were saying, well, hey, I don't agree with that. That's one thing. That's one step of compromise. Then you get the next compromise, which is that, no, actually, I don't even want your point of view on this campus. You're so out of the box, Seth, that you can't come and speak on this issue at a Christian college. I still think that a lot of Christian parents that are sending their kids to Christian colleges, I don't think that they're aware of this. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, that's right. And so part of what we reveal in the book and film, John, is exactly how long the other side, let's call them, I don't know, the high priests of humanism. Okay, I don't know, the pontiffs of progressivism, the priestesses of our culture of death, how long that religion of Darwinism, neo-Malthusianism, Klaus Schwabism, secular humanism, how dogmatic and zealous the other side has been for their religion in the public square. So no, you're completely right about our Christian colleges, because the other side has been more quote unquote religious. And what they did is they took our strategy and they flipped it upside down, John. It's the Great Commission flipped upside down. They've taken their religion and discipleship to the very ends of the earth. They have raised up the next generation to be little priests and priestesses of a death cult. And they'll be more unapologetic and committed to that quote unquote discipleship than most American Christians have been and maybe in about the last 100 years or so. And so when parents walk up to me, because I'm on the road, 9 days a month speaking, they say, where should I send my kids? And I've got like 5 or 6 Christian colleges that I feel comfortable recommending off the top of my head. I mean, we're in a very dangerous situation. We wonder why the pastors, right, why the Christians are so silent in America. Well, what about the pastors who are shepherding them? Oh, right, that's right. By and large, most pastors in America are pretty weak. Well, to borrow your phrase, weak, wimpy, and woke. So why are they that way? Let's look at their seminaries. Where did they go get educated? You see, we go down the rabbit hole here, and yet most of our seminaries are a joke. Most of our Christian undergraduate colleges are a joke. So what do we expect? Why are we surprised at the nature of the American church when we care more about buildings, budgets, and baptisms than about fostering and creating a culture of life and being actually a bulwark between evil and the next generation?
You're really right about the seminary thing. Dead right about it. So the book and the documentary are called the same thing, right? They're both called
That's right.
the 1916 Project. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
All right, both call that. I had the pleasure of reading the book when I was in Australia, just about, I don't know, whenever that was, 2 months ago. And it's not out yet, but you sent me the book, and I was thinking, obviously, I'm going to read it. I know I'll like it. Seth's a smart guy, and I'm sure there's going to be great information in there. I am not going to lie to you, man. This book made me angrier than I thought I would be. And I'm not completely ignorant about uh,
Mm.
how abortion started. I'm not completely ignorant about Margaret Sanger. I'm definitely not ignorant about the sexual revolution and whether we're talking about Marxism, radical
Yeah.
feminism. I am not ignorant about these things. Seeing the web, now you cover this in the documentary as well. I mean, I would recommend watching the documentary and getting the book. I loved the book,
Thank you.
but the documentary covers this as well. It's the web of all of it, and in some
Mm.
ways, not to promote my book, but I thought that I tried to do something similar in my book that I think you did in yours. Mine was like, okay, how do these things go together? So for me, it was, how does Marxism, postmodernism, and
Yep.
other woke movement, how do all these things go together, right? Yours was brilliant in that you have Margaret Sanger, you've got the eugenics stuff, you've got evolution, then you've got the sexual revolution.
That's
Putting
right.
this together and finding that abortion, as you would call it, is the linchpin for this
Yep.
really was brilliant. Would you mind talking about this linchpin idea? I don't think that many people know this.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I appreciate that, brother. So what are we dealing with? We're not just dealing with the killing of babies, as if that wasn't bad enough,
Yeah,
Christian.
yeah,
For
yeah.
goodness sakes, like
It's
this
like
is
the
like,
worst tweet ever.
yeah, it's like this old. This is like old ancient stuff, guys. Okay, and Christians tend to deal with culture and worldviews, to quote Schaeffer, in bits and pieces. We try to
Yes, that's
master
right.
arguments for individual issues, like how do I make sure I'm ready for the abortion debate? How do I make sure I'm ready for the cultural Marxism debate and the critical race theory debate? And what was that about Frankfurt School? And what were those guys doing? And who was Antonio Gramsci or Karl Marx or what was that? And we try to master arguments for individual issues. And as Nancy Pearcey says, we're not really effective that way. There's an underlying worldview to all of the secular issues in our country. And if we can master that worldview, we'll be far more effective, because then we're preaching against an entire system, an entire web of ideas that do coalesce, don't they, John? I mean, we've all seen the crossover
Yes.
that often happens between, I don't know, Planned Parenthood and Black Lives Matter. It's like, why would those two organizations have anything to do with each other? One group is called Black Lives Matter, and the other group kills more black lives every 14 days than the KKK lynched in 100 years. Why would y'all be friends? Why? Because there's an
Dude,
underlying
say that one
worldview,
more
John.
time.
Oh, yeah.
Pause and
Yeah,
say
that's
say
right.
the statistic one more time. Say it.
Yeah, that's right. Planned Parenthood kills more unarmed black lives every 2 weeks than the KKK lynched in a century. I mean, that's just statistical. We know that.
Remarkable.
You can go Google how many people the KKK killed in 100 years. Planned Parenthood alone. But notice, by the way, Christian, I didn't say the abortion industry. I said just the organization Planned Parenthood kills more black babies every 14 days. Okay, and they perform about 33% of the nation's abortions, John. One organization performs about a third of our nation's abortions. And so why would two groups like that be friends? You know, you're like, what the heck's wrong with you? Like, why? There's an underlying worldview, and what is that underlying worldview that tends to almost always connect the various secular, humanistic, we hate God and babies and the family organizations together? It's the hatred for God. It's the hatred for the nuclear family. It's the hatred for all of the things that God said you should do. Be fruitful and multiply. Be the man of but one wife. All these things that the left understands that we are in a spiritual battle. Oh, for Christians who understand, John, that the culture war is actually a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. So to go really around the barn, to answer your question here, what is the 1916 Project? Well, it helps connect all of the various unfoldings and iterations of our culture of death today, so you, Christian, can see how it's all really the same thing. But there is something about the baby killing thing that really seems to function as sort of the centerpiece of secularism, if you will. Let's call it the linchpin upon which the liberal establishment swings. But what happens when you pull out a linchpin? The door falls off. And so when Roe versus Wade got overturned and that linchpin started getting lifted out, The liberal establishment lost their flipping minds. And in the 60 to 90 days following the overturning of Roe, John, over 100 pro-life ministries in America were firebombed, vandalized, and burnt down. And they were spray painting on the walls of pro-life ministries and pregnancy centers the words, "If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either." Well, that sounds like a domestic terrorist threat against pro-lifers for being pro-life. Yeah, but Merrick Garland, he's too busy looking into parents speaking at school board meetings as domestic terrorists. And so when you come for issues like the babies and you want to come and protect the babies, notice, Christian, how it drives the left, let's just use that word for our purpose, insane. And why is that? Why is that? Well, it's because child killing has always been a central sort of pillar of pagan societies. Once you get to child killing, you are in the final sort of home stretcher years of what you can call your civilization. There has been 100% correlation historically between sexual craziness and cultural decline, and a 100% correlation between sexual monogamy in marriage and cultural advancement. And so child sacrifice is always the conclusion of sexual liberation, of sexual revolution. And we find this in Judges 6, by the way, bro. In Judges 6, you've got this Gideon. This was his pansy. This is when he was still a pansy. It was before he was a mighty man of valor. And so this is pansy years. This is like Andy Stanley, Rick Warren years. And he's up in his cave or wine press or something like that. And he's threshing his own wheat because they have Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism. And so the Midianites are oppressing the Israelites, and they take all the wheat that the Israelites make. It's democratic. I don't know. Somehow that's better than, I think it's democratic socialism. It's like icing on a turd or it's something like that. So the Midianites just are oppressing the Israelites. And so Gideon's saying he's a tax evader, right? So he's keeping the wheat to himself. He's not giving the Midianites his fair share. And the angel of the Lord comes to Gideon in Judges 6, and he says, "Mighty man of valor." He reminds him of his identity while he's hiding up in a little mountain cave like a pansy, letting his people be robbed by the Midianites. And he cooks God a meal. The angel of the Lord lights it on fire. Gideon freaks out. He has a Job moment, like, I'm going to shut up now. And then it says, and then God said, "Walk out of this cave, and you go tear down those altars to Baal, and you chop up the Asherah poles." Well, who is Asherah or Astaroth? Well, it's the goddess of sex, okay, guys, fertility, sex goddess. So they would worship Asherah through orgies and unbridled sexual expression, okay? And you guys remember the Asherah poles if you're a Christian in the Old Testament. And so what happens when you worship Asherah, when you do weird orgy sex cult stuff? What happens, y'all? Babies get conceived when you do weird sex stuff with lots of strangers. But that's why we have Baal, John. So 9 months later, just pass the child through the fire. Yes, they sacrifice children to Moloch, Christian, but they also sacrifice babies to Baal. And so who are the two pagan gods in Judges 6? The sex cult and baby sacrifice. What are the two pagan gods of America today, John, if not sex cults and baby sacrifice, for goodness sakes? As it was in Judges 6, so it is today. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Let me prove to you now, biblically, the answer to John's question. Why is this the linchpin, and why should Christians understand this as the centerpiece of secularism? God does not start with their border policy. He does not start with their tax rate. He does not start with their economy. All important issues, and we have Christian worldview answers to all those issues and questions, Christian. That's not my point. My point is this. Where does God show and exhibit his high kingdom priorities in the midst of weird sex cult orgy worship and sacrificing children? Where does God exemplify what matters to him most right then? What does he address? Tear it all down. We're not going to talk about anything else. We're not even going to go wipe out the Midianites yet. Because, John, if I'm Gideon, what am I thinking? As we've been oppressed by a foreign people group, I thought I was God's special chosen people. Aren't we the Israelites? Why has God abandoned us? Where's the milk and honey, yo? Where's these wonderful free us from the Egyptian acts? And then the angel comes back? John, I'd be thinking, oh, it's time to make some Midianites' heads roll, baby. The angel of the Lord is back. No, that's not where God starts. Why? Because judgment begins in the house of the Lord. And God says, you tear down the sex cult idols and the baby sacrifice idols. You do that first, then we'll talk. That's why child killing, abortion, child sacrifice is the linchpin of our entire culture of death today. for if you can kill a child in the name of selfishness, sexual liberation, or radical feminism, there's nothing else you can't do. Mother Teresa once said that all for a nation that kills her own children, what is left for us but to kill one another?
Mm. That is so absolutely dang solid. You know, what I think that the enemy has done his work very well. As you said, he's been doing his work a lot better than we have. And I think that there are still a lot of, I believe, how do you want to say it? Christians who are, I don't know the right word, is it good hearted? I don't know, well meaning Christians. In other words, I don't want to condemn all of them. I want to wake them up.
I think the word you're looking for is pathological compassion.
Pathological compassion is exactly the words I was looking for. Who still just think, yeah, but you just can't get too loud about this abortion thing because it's so condemning and it's so harsh and it's this. And I just think that they haven't understood what we're really dealing with here. We're dealing with the number one cause of death in America. It's the number one cause of death. People are not dying of starvation. They're not dying of cancer in the same numbers. We're just killing people. And I thought that maybe it would be good for you to, you use this term a lot, the culture of death. I use it sometimes too. I think you'd be a good person to say, can you give me a succinct definition? What do you mean when you say culture of death?
Margaret Sanger summed up what she meant by that very well in 1914 in her magazine, The Woman Rebel. The Woman Rebel. And here's how she would have defined the culture of death, John. Ready for this? No gods, no masters.
Boom. That's it. That's about as good as you can get right there. I mean, the work you got, let's delve into the Margaret Sanger thing. I think a lot of people, the hugest irony of all, you cover it, a lot of people don't know. So Margaret Sanger, who's the creator of what became Planned Parenthood, she's a hero of the left. She's a hero of Hillary Clinton and a whole bunch of other people, as we know. We even know that in 1968, I can't remember if that's the exact right year, Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Margaret Sanger Planned Parenthood Award, 68 or 69, I can't remember. And a lot of people don't understand that abortion was birthed out of racism, out of a desire really to just eradicate Black people. It's not an exaggeration. There's nothing more racist than this. And a lot of people don't know. You delve into the Margaret Sanger thing, but one more thing, and you can kind of weave in and out however you want to, Seth, but we also probably wouldn't have had the Margaret Sanger eugenics type stuff had we not had Charles Darwin's evolution. Seeing the way these things come together, it is mind blowing. So you choose which one you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, John. No, I appreciate you. So back to what I said earlier about how Christians deal with issues in bits and pieces, with worldview issues in bits and pieces. Let me be very clear here, Christian. Okay, Margaret Sanger did not set out to help poor minorities plan their parenthood by giving them birth control. She didn't set out even necessarily to create abortion on demand. Okay, she set out to change Western civilization and replace it with something new and fresh. That's why they call themselves progressives, right, John? We're making progress. The ironic thing about progressivism is it's regressive. It's very regressive. And all of their ideas are not more modern, but far more ancient than those of our revolutionary founding fathers. And so Margaret Sanger's goal was to fundamentally change Christendom and replace it with neo-pagan revivalism. And so Margaret Sanger wasn't just like a feminist, okay? She wasn't just like a birth control queen. She was a communist Marxist. Okay, like if you study who this woman was, she was not just like. By the way, she coined the term birth control. That's where the term comes from. You know, it's like, well, we just want to help people control their birth. No. She wanted to use birth control to control what kind of people got birthed. Okay, y'all, Christian, birth control didn't mean Here, you poor Hispanic mom, we love you so much. Make sure you don't have too many kids so you can be a good mom to the kids you already have. No, 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 no. She put her birth control clinics in minority neighborhoods to control birth. There's certain people she wanted to have birth, and there's other people she didn't want having kids, y'all. Yeah, this is what eugenics is. I'll get into it in just 1 second, but I just want you to be clear. Like, who we're talking about is not just like, oh, that's the abortion issue. No, it was to fundamentally change America. Like Obama said, remember when he was running for president, he said, I want to fundamentally change America. Well, you don't want to fundamentally change something that you love, okay? Husband, try telling your wife, baby, I want to fundamentally transform you. Okay, it's probably not going to go over well. You don't want to fundamentally transform something that you love. These people wanted to fundamentally transform America and the American family because they hate America and the American family. Okay, and there's plenty of Sanger quotes about how much she hated capitalism, how much she hated the free market. This woman was a kooky sexual weirdo. Okay, but she's probably the most successful leftist revolutionary activist of the last 115 years. And that's not even my opinion. H.G. Wells, ever heard of War of the Worlds? H.G. Wells, who was one of Sanger's many bed partners, let's just put it that way for your family listeners, John, um, once said this about Margaret Sanger. This is super interesting. H.G. Wells said, Alexander the Great changed a few boundaries and he killed a few men. Both he and Napoleon were forced into fame by circumstances outside of themselves and by currents of their time. But Margaret Sanger made currents and made circumstances. He said, when the history of our civilization is written, it will be a biological history, and Margaret Sanger will be its heroine. Now,
Wow.
whether he was saying that because he was diddling her or because he actually believed that, I'm not sure. Turns out Margaret Sanger had a lot of affairs and participated in many orgies and affairs. So I know it'll shock you to find out, Christian, that Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, wasn't a great mother. I know it's kind of like a man bites dog story, but there you go. So in 1916, when she returns from England because she fled New York authorities for breaking the obscenity laws through her radical magazine, The Woman Rebel, she returns to America, and in 1916, she opens up her first clinic in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, New York, an area heavily populated by immigrants, Blacks, Slavs, Italians, and Jews. The reason I called it the 1916 Project, John, is because it's a little bit of a play on the 1619 Project. Because the New York Times, in about 9 months before George Floyd, they said they released this thing in the fall of 2019 called the 1619 Project. And your listeners might remember this. They said America's real birthday is not 1776, it's 1619. And the subtitle was A New Founding. A new founding. They're saying our real founding
Right.
was 1619 when the first black slaves come to America. And they said that's who we are. We're so racist and we're such a horrible people and country that date, 1619, that really represents who we are today because of how bad and racist we are. And by Nicole Hannah Jones, the purple haired Marxist. And I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to be derogatory. She has purple hair and she's a Marxist. She was actually mentored, John, by Angela Davis, one of the last surviving members of that second generation of Frankfurt School cultural Marxists. You guys might remember the Frankfurt School was in Frankfurt, Germany, and it was led by German Jews. And they were launching their Frankfurt School based off of the letters of Antonio Gramsci, who followed the writings of Karl Marx. And Antonio Gramsci went afoul of Mussolini. He pissed off Mussolini, and he spent the rest of his life in prison. And Gramsci wrote voluminously about his theories on critical theory and critical race theory and cultural Marxism. Antonio Gramsci becomes sort of the father of the Frankfurt School. Then, because it's led by German Jews, they fled Germany because they were afraid of Hitler, and they set up the Frankfurt School at Columbia University. So Bill and Hillary Clinton get educated at Frankfurt at Columbia University. And recently, actually, this is interesting, John.
And these are also the when we say Frankfurt School, we're really talking about the critical theorist.
Yep.
Sometimes we
Cultural
call them
Marxism.
neo-Marxists. We sometimes call them.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. And so a professor and an American leftist who's an expert on Gramsci, on Gramsciism, Antonio Gramsci, which again, he becomes the intellectual father of the Frankfurt School. A few years ago, an American leftist translated Gramsci's prison letters into English for American leftists. A professor by the name of Joseph Buttigieg, the father of a certain Mayor Pete Buttigieg. the gay mayor of the town in Indiana, who says we have racist highways. He's our transportation director, and he was on paternity leave because of his breasts. He was chest feeding his child with his quote unquote husband, and it take having kids, right? It's real toll on us fathers, right, John? Yeah. So anyway, so
Yeah.
that's our transportation director for Biden. So his father is an expert on critical theory and cultural Marxism, and really the American expert on Gramsci. And what the cultural Marxists and Frankfurt School revolutionaries called it, John, they called it the strategy of the robes. And this is what Sanger probably perfected better than any other leftist in the last 115 years. Gramsci called it the strategy of the robes. And what did they mean by this? They meant that, the riots in the street, the police-free zones in Seattle, the Chaz Chop police-free zones, these riots, they're not working to usher in the leftist revolution. And so we need to approach this battle culturally, right? If you're going to change the culture, you've got to approach it culturally. And so they said, if we can get the robes of the academy, if we can control the robes of the scientific organizations, if we can control the robes of academia, if we can control the robes of the clergy, then onward with the revolution. Then we can push forward the revolution culturally, right? Hitler would say things like, I don't care about my detractors because I have your children in my schools. Right. So if we can approach it culturally and capture the next generation through culturally formative institutions, that will be the more effective way to change the culture. And they have done that. And Margaret Sanger probably perfected the strategy of the robes better than almost anyone else. She had conservatives and liberals supporting her, funding Planned Parenthood. And so interestingly, it's not 1619 that explains our current crazy, kooky culture of death today. It's 1916, when Margaret Sanger opened up the first clinic of what would become one of the largest, best funded, and most profitable 501c3 organizations in human history, the largest abortion provider in the world, the largest provider of that pornographic comprehensive sexuality education in America's public schools that has a lot of angry moms and dads speaking at school board meetings because of that kind of curriculum. And as of last year, John, Planned Parenthood is now the second largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers for America's gender-confused youth. That's right, y'all, the largest abortion provider in the world is now the second largest provider of chemically castrating transgender drugs for America's gender-confused youth. How did that happen? We go back to 1916 and we really find the seeds of that movement. The Bible talks about bad seed yields a bitter harvest, John. So if you know the kind of seed, you can probably predict the harvest. Or if you see a rotten harvest, you can probably guess that the seed was bad. Well, we've exposed exactly what that seed is of Planned Parenthood, who is not just an abortion organization, they're a culture of death organization. And 1916 is probably has that date, and that woman, Margaret Sanger, has probably had more of a wicked impact and more of their fingerprints on today's culture in 2024 than maybe any other woman in any other date in the 20th century. And we can dive into that now if you'd like, exactly what she believed, what she said, and the kind of projects that she launched. But it was nothing other than the overturnings of the standards of an entire civilization.
Mm. I was reading a book this week that I really love. The book, it's an older book called The Unshakable Kingdom and the Unchanging Person. It's one of the most influential books on me. I read it when I was probably in the year 2000. I'm reading it again. And he says in there, he says that if you take the word live, that's what God says. God says, I show you got two paths before you, life and death.
That's right.
I'm giving you the words of life so that you will choose life, right? And this E. Stanley Jones is the author. I've never thought about this. He says, if you take the word live and you read it backwards, what does it spell? Evil. I've never thought about that. Is that really funny or what? You live or you can do evil. And what he's saying is this. I thought that was an interesting way to think about this culture of death, because sometimes when we say things like this, Margaret Sanger's mission was not to help women. Margaret Sanger's mission was to go to war with Jehovah. To go to war with God. What does she want to do? She wants to do evil against a God that says, I give you life and death. Choose life
That's
that you may
right.
live, right?
That's
And
right.
sometimes when we say these things, I mean, believe me, whoever's listening, believe me, I understand if you hear me say something like this, she's going to war against God. I understand that some people are going to go, oh, that just sounds so churchy, or it's like such a huge generalization and it can't possibly be true. And it really is true. You have to understand what people mean when they say the culture of death or a war against God. God has created his world to
That's
work
right.
in a certain way. And by the time we get to 1916, as you say, by the time we get here, what you are dealing with is Charles Darwin's evolution that says
Yep.
there is no God, there is no transcendent meaning in your life. You are just survival of the fittest. You're here by
That's right.
chance, basically.
That's
You
right.
go from that into the eugenics stuff. Well, if there is no
Did you
God,
know? That's
oh, go
right.
ahead.
Did you know the link there, by the way? Did you know that link before you read my book?
No,
Basically, we can go from Darwin to Sanger, and I can trace that not just ideologically, but through actual individual relationships.
no, I did not know that at all. You have um, uh, Darwin's say half cousin.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. His half cousin is Francis Galton, and so let me provide a little intellectual rigor to prove to you the truth that John's spitting right now. He's not just commenting; what John is saying can actually be proved, and you're right over the target, brother. So Darwin actually was influenced. Actually, we can go back a bit further. Darwin, John, was influenced and read the writings of Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was the first Bill Gates. He was the first Klaus Schwab. He was the first Bernie Sanders. He was the first there's too many people on planet Earth. And so eventually human reproduction is going to outpace our ability to provide food and resources to those people. So we're going to have a population bomb and we're going to have massive starvation everywhere. Okay, so guess when Thomas Malthus started predicting that? 1798. So this goes back a long, long time. America's only like 20 years old at this point. And Thomas Malthus, a clergyman, actually, says,
Oh,
we got to follow the science, John. You got to follow
exactly.
the science. And I can prove to you that scientifically, if something doesn't change in the next 40 or 50 years, we're going to have massive starvation all around the world. Okay, well, yeah, that sounds like AOC and Bernie Sanders and the entire liberal establishment today. Bro, y'all, Christian, listen to me. They've been saying that for over 200 years. They've been predicting massive starvation if you don't follow their liberal protocols for population reduction. These
Yeah.
eugenicists. Okay, so Darwin read Malthus, Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus said things like, "We need to encourage like marshy and unwholesome populations to build their homes there. We need to encourage the poor to live in marshy and unwholesome situations so that they die off because they're a threat to too many people on planet Earth. So it should be the poorer, right, that die. Have you
Right.
noticed this, by the way, about all
Naturally.
the overpopulation? It's like Bernie Sanders isn't willing to go Hillary Clinton himself. I'm sorry, suicide himself, right? He just calls for sterilizations in poor black countries overseas. It's like, Bernie Sanders, why don't you start with yourself? Why don't you go ahead and prove the courage of your own convictions and slit your own throat, you neo-Malthusian overpopulationist? But it's always the poorer and darker of skin. Notice this about liberals, by the way. So Darwin read Malthus, John. And then Darwin writes on the origin of species, and it drove his study of the beagle, right? And so he says what? Survival of the fittest. We came from animals. There is no imago Dei or image of God. So the strong will survive and the weak will die. This is an animal kingdom after all, so deal with it. So there's Darwin. His half cousin, Francis Galton, read Origin of Species and it transformed his life. I've read Galton's writings, by the way, about his thoughts having read his cousin's book. And he says it changed his life. He's the father of eugenics. He coins the term eugenics. That word didn't exist until Darwin's half cousin invented the word eugenics. And so he says, well, if it's survival of the fittest, then let's see, we also need the elimination of the unfit. If the fittest are going to survive, like my cousin said, that we're going to have to eliminate the unfit. By what? By sterilizing them or killing them or putting them in concentration camps. All things that Francis Galton was an advocate for. Galton then mentored a man, and they were pen pals, bro. Like there's letters between them. We can prove this. His name was Havelock Ellis. Havelock Ellis, Christian, was the Alfred Kinsey of England. That's the best way to put it. And we have a whole chapter kind of on Kinsey and stuff in my book, The 1916 Project. You can go pre-order that book right now at the1916project.com. But Havelock Ellis hosted orgies in his home. He forced his wife into lesbianism. He would make his wife watch him while he participated in these entanglements with both men and women. Havelock Ellis was a sexual theorist. He was one of the fathers of the free love movement. And guess who Sanger shacked up with when she fled New York City, John, for England to avoid New York state law because she had broken our obscenity laws in 1914. I bet you can't guess who she shacked up with. Havelock Ellis, who had been the protege of Francis Galton, the father of eugenics, who was the protege of his cousin Charles Darwin, who was the protege of Thomas Malthus, the first overpopulationist. Havelock Ellis and Sanger would have entanglements sexually, and they would remain pen pals until Havelock Ellis's death. Sanger said, this is the founder of Planned Parenthood, y'all, about Havelock Ellis, that he was her most significant mentor in her life. And he coached her on her journey back to New York on how to usher in the revolution. He coached her to stop using words like communism because that was a little bit too, like, Americans weren't really on board with that. We didn't really like that. He said, focus on the more scientific sounding themes of eugenics and neo-Malthusianism. So Sanger began to host neo-Malthusian conferences when she came back to New York City. She called them, John, neo-Malthusian birth control conferences in 1925 at the Hotel McAlpin, 4 years after Planned Parenthood was founded. And she would host the intellectual drivers of eugenics from all around the world. Now, Christian, if you're thinking of Mao Zedong, Hitler, Mussolini, Pol Pot, and Hitler, good job. That's all eugenics. Eugenics basically believes there are good people and bad people. There are fit people and unfit people. And so the unfit people should probably be sterilized. We probably shouldn't let them have kids. Now, she would host these conferences to mainstream these ideas on the world stage and on the American stage in the most culturally formative city in the world, New York City. Now, let me just let Sanger speak for herself, because the way I'm talking right now, John, a lot of people are like saying what you said earlier. Really? Come on, that sounds crazy and kooky.
Just so
let's let the woman speak for herself. That's right. Let's let the woman speak for herself, John. So you ready for this, Christian? Here's a few Sanger quotes off the top of my head. The marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order. End quote, Margaret Sanger. Here's another one. Our objective is unlimited sexual gratification without the burden of unwanted children. End quote, Margaret Sanger in her first magazine, Woman Rebel, in 1914. Here's another one. Apply a stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is tainted, whose inheritance would be of no value, and who may transmit objectionable traits to their offspring. Okay, there's another Margaret Sanger quote. How about this one? Birth control is not contraception, thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. It means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds, which threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization. Here's another one. Birth control appeals to the advanced radical because it is calculated to undermine the authority of the Christian church. She said, I look forward to seeing humanity freed someday from the tyranny of Christianity, no less than from capitalism. Here's one more. Through sex, mankind may attain that great spiritual illumination, which will transform the world and light up the only path to an earthly paradise. End quote, Margaret Sanger, the woman who founded the largest abortion provider in the world.
Yeah, it's just absolutely remarkable. Let's turn a corner here because we're running out of time. I want to talk about what we're going to do about it, but I just want to say a few things. All these things you're talking about are in the book. They are maddening. I was fairly educated on it. I did not know a lot of this. It made me so angry reading this book. I was ready to pick up a pitchfork. I'll tell you what. And one of the things I just want to mention is that a lot of Christian people are under the delusion, for instance, like I hear this about Karl Marx. Well, Karl Marx, yeah, he did some bad things, but his motives were good. He really just wanted to help the poor. Not true. That is a lie. And in the same way that that's a lie, is the lie that you said earlier. Margaret Sanger, in the end, she just really wants to help women better their lives. And that's not what's going on. You mentioned several times that it is a secular humanism, it is a humanistic view. And I just want to say for listeners, secular humanism is at odds with the Christian God. I mean, it is a winner takes all battle. Okay. You can't have a little bit of secular humanism in your Christianity. It doesn't work. All right. So secular humanism is basically this: we humans have everything we need within our own selves to create the moral order. There is no God. We don't need any God's instructions. We can do it on our own. Okay. So what you're really dealing with here in the abortion issue, we're lied to. We're people that we're treated by. If you have friends on the left, like I do, a lot of the times we're treated as if we just don't care about women, or we just don't care about their health, or whatever it is. And they don't understand that all this stuff is together. You're talking about Darwin's evolution, eugenics, population control, racism, all the Nazi stuff, which we didn't even get into, which is very tied into this. You're getting into the sexual revolution. You're getting into the sexual revolution side of humanism that says basically it's kind of the Freud version, which is we are going to reach utopia through the unleashing of our sexual selves, because we are first and foremost nothing but sexual animals. All of this stuff.
They called it freeing the libido, by the way.
Free the libido. How is that working out? And now what we're seeing is, I just want to say, Christian, ask yourself this question: if abortion was just nothing more than trying to help women, then why is Planned Parenthood, as Seth just said, now the second largest provider of all of the trans stuff for these kids? This stuff is such a war against God. And so what I want to ask you, Seth, is this: what are we going to do about it, man? Tell me what we're going to do about it. Tell me what you're doing about it with White Rose Resistance. Tell people what they can do to join. Do their voices even matter at this point?
Amen. That's right. Well, brother, God never leaves us without the remnant, right? Yes. He never leaves us without those heroes of the faith. And we look back at those heroes, not just to say, good job, brother, good job, sister, in your cloud of witnesses. We look back to find inspiration for now and for moving forward, to remember the great cloud of witnesses we're a part of. And so we finished my book, The 1916 Project. By the way, the subtitle, if you're listening to John's show right now, the subtitle is The Lying, the Witch, and the War We're In. So kind of fun there. You might get that reference. So and we finish with the heroes of the faith, because God has called us to be salt and light. We worship the way, the truth, and the life. If Christians can't rightly handle the word of truth, if they can't stand for objective truth in the public square, if they can't bring the truth into conflict with demonic ideologies, then who will? This is our calling. So we, in the second to last chapter, we tell about the stories of about 6 or 7 different heroes of Christendom who stood against a culture of death. And then we finish with the story of the White Rose Resistance. And so what do? Brother, we reclaim our calling. Guys, I don't think the politicians are coming to save us. Let me just say that. I think there are too many rhinos and weak men in the Republican Party.
Yes, 100%.
To provide any real hope in these coming years. I believe that if America is, quote unquote, turned around, if we have, to quote Abraham Lincoln, a new birth of freedom, I think it will happen because godly men and women participating in Christian resistance are pushing back in their city, in their county, in their state, and they're learning to look the spirit of the age and his acolytes in the eyes and say no, and learn to say no. And so that's why we tell the story of the White Rose Resistance. We are the White Rose Resistance 2.0. It's based off of the story of the first White Rose Resistance in Nazi Germany. And they were kids in their 20s who were distributing information and leaflets to try to prick the conscience of the people, expose the deeds of darkness, and ask them to wake up and do something. So it was a social media campaign pre-digital age. So we're doing this film and our content and our training to prick the conscience of the people and equip and give resources to the church to go be the resistance. Our mantra at the White Rose Resistance with my team and I, John, is we're trying to put ourselves out of a job. I think 501c3 justice ministries do good work. For goodness sakes, I lead one. But I think we're doing the work that the local church used to do. I think the work that many nonprofits do today, 200 years ago, 300, 400, 500, 600 years ago, was being done by believers locally where God had them, dealing with injustices, pushing back, loving the least of these. It didn't take another 501c3 to do the work that Christians should be naturally doing in the public square. So that's what we're about. And so we're now hosting screenings of this film all around the country. In fact, we're getting screenings from requests from Australia, from South America, from Ireland, screening this all around the world. The only way you can watch it right now is by going to the 1916project.com and press host a screening or attend the screening. And you can host one of these screenings at your church right now as you're listening to this on the Cooper Stuff podcast. You can host a screening at your church. And if I can zoom in, I'll zoom in live and chat with y'all afterwards. If I can't, we'll try to get one of our representatives there. Or you can see our screening around the country. We're doing a big tour that I'll be at. John Cooper will be at some of those, Eric Metaxas, Abby Johnson, and several others. And then the book goes a lot deeper. So if you watch the film, it's 75 minutes and you're like, man, I want more. I want to be more equipped. I put everything I couldn't fit in the film into the book, The 1916 Project. And you can pre-order that at the 1916project.com. Don't give your money to baby-hating, Christian-hating Amazon. Get it from us at the 1916project.com. And so now we're launching resistance chapters all around the country. That's what we're doing to answer the question, what should we do, John? So we're now hiring regional coordinators. We've launched in Boise, Idaho. We're launching in Southern California in August, in Denver in August. We're launching in Dallas, Fort Worth in the fall. And we're looking at a launch later this year in Nevada and Florida as well. With the overturning of Roe, states are now fighting to either ban abortion or to codify abortion into their state constitution through point of birth. That's what the Democrats are doing in blue states after the overturning of Roe, John, which means that all of our pro-life legislative efforts are dead on arrival. I hope you understand that. Like in California, if you even propose a pro-life law now, it doesn't even get a chance because California has declared it's a constitutional California right to kill your baby through all 9 months of pregnancy funded by the taxpayer. How do we get rid of that? We have to change the law, which means Christians have to get involved socially and culturally and politically once again. So if you want to be part of the White Rose Resistance, host a screening at your church, the 1916project.com. And if you join the White Rose Resistance as an ally, those are our $35 a month donors, you get a battle box in the mail because we believe that you, Christian, are the resistance. And we're doing a lot at our ministry, John, to equip believers with the resources, training, books, curriculum, live calls with me and my team so that when they're in their communities, when they're at work, when they're at their school, they feel not just confident, but equipped to be salt and push back against the darkness.
Great. Well, I'm going to be joining you guys in Albuquerque. Is that right?
That's right. We're going to, if you want to see John at one of our screenings, we'll be in Albuquerque at Legacy Church on August 18th in the evening, Sunday, August 18th, Legacy Church in Albuquerque for a big screening of the film with you, John.
Yeah. Great. Well, I want to encourage people, go check out, do all the things Seth said, check out the book. You're going to learn a lot. Hopefully you've learned a lot on this episode. Seth, I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for jumping on the program. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for your voice. We'll see you soon.
Read the Bible.